Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Larry Parks Show. I'm Larry Parks, and tonight we're going to continue with our series on wealth preservation and how you can protect yourself from what's absolutely coming, a collapse of the dollar. This Tuesday and Wednesday, I went to a terrific conference hosted by something called Investment News. Go to the first slide, please. This is a publication that once a year holds a wonderful retirement planning conference. The audience for this conference are financial advisors. Come back to me, please. These are people who advise folks like you on how to jigger your retirement savings so as to plan for your retirement. Typically, they may have anywhere from a few hundred to several thousand clients who they deal with. Some of the firms who are represented are major firms that have many tens of thousands, maybe 50, 60,000 up of clients who they represent. And I'm going to show you in just a few minutes, in my opinion, the advice given to these clients is completely bogus. Completely bogus. I think that all these people are being misled as to how they should allocate their assets to plan for their retirement, and I think I'm going to make a pretty strong case as to why that's so. It turns out that the people who survive the most are women. In terms of retirement planning. They're the ones who have the biggest problem. Why? Because the men they marry are almost always older than they, and plus the women have a longer life expectancy. So the men die first, and then the women have to cope with how to make do. And it turns out that the biggest fear that elderly women have across the board, go to the next slide please, is will I run out of money? And they don't want to end up as a homeless bag lady. I mean, this is the kind of thinking that these folks are going through their minds. Come back to me, please. And so what happens is, again, in most cases, these women do not have financial expertise, and they turn to people who they think are experts in how to plan or allocate whatever assets they have left so they don't run out of money. And the kind of issues that come up, there are two principal issues. Go to the next slide, please. And that is what they call sustainability, that you don't run out of money, and ruin, that you do run out of money. So you want to be able to have enough money to last you through the next 20, 30, 40 years, depending on how old you are. And in no event do you want to run out of money. Come back to me, please. And the problem with running out of money is that if you're an elderly woman, say 85 years old or something like that, and you have no resources, how do you live? And the answer is you don't. You die. In places like Russia, when the money collapsed in 1992, this fellow, Paul Klebnikov, he was the editor of Forbes in Russia who got assassinated there. He told me that longevity went down 5 years for men, 4 years for women. Why? Because they couldn't buy medicine, couldn't buy proper food, couldn't take care of themselves. They're freezing to death in the boondocks. Stay with that same slide. Just bring that same slide up again. Don't go ahead. So in order to make these plans, they have to make assumptions, and they make assumptions on what they call the return on investment, what the assets of these people have will continue to earn, plus they make an assumption about future inflation. Come back to me, please. The returns on investment derive mostly from what Wall Street people have told them, and they're based on historical returns. So if you look at the period, and they do look at the period from 1980 to, say, the year 2000, at a time when the money supply increased from roughly $2 trillion to $12 trillion, although they don't talk about the money supply, the stock market went straight up. And so part of the plan is that they may assume returns on stocks as high as 9%. And of course, in recent years, those returns haven't been there, and there's no reason to think they're going to be there going forward. As far as the assumptions about inflation are concerned, as you've seen if you've been watching the show for a while, and you'll see again later in the show, all of these assumptions are wrong. They're assuming inflation something on the order of 2, 3%, maybe 4% at the outside. This is completely bogus. So in other words, what's happening here is that they're telling them that the assets that they have are going to have bigger returns than in fact they will have, and they're underestimating inflation. But most importantly, they're ignoring what I call the elephant in the room. Go to the next slide, please. So there's an elephant in the living room of every one of these people who are retiring, and the response of those who plan the retirement is to pretend it's not there. Come back to me, please. It's just ridiculous. And what the elephant is, and let me tell you, I went to this conference last year. It's a terrific conference, and the people from Investment News do a bang-up job. But last year and this year, there was no mention of the $671 trillion, with a T, $trillion worth of derivatives that are outstanding, excuse me, at the end of the third quarter 2007, roughly 6 months ago. Wouldn't surprise me if the current number is that there's 1,000 trillion worth of derivatives outstanding. Go to the next slide, please. This is a chart showing the outstanding derivatives. The numbers come from the Bank for International Settlements, which is in Switzerland, in Basel, Switzerland, and they collect numbers worldwide from the banks. Now you notice that at the end of June 2007, the amount of derivatives outstanding were 516 trillion, and in just 3 months it increased another 155 trillion to 671 trillion. Come back to me, please. These derivatives, these are just bets that banks make. They're just bets. And in effect, because bank balance sheets are de facto protected by the taxpayers, that's you, the banks are in fact gambling. There is no possible business reason for the banks to enter into $671 trillion worth of derivative bets. Now, these numbers are worldwide. In the United States, roughly as of that same period, September 2007, according to the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, the amount of derivatives outstanding were roughly 172 trillion. And of that 172 trillion, 90% were in just 3 banks. Go to the next slide, please. And those 3 banks are J.P. Morgan Chase, Citibank, and Bank America. And as you can see, J.P. Morgan Chase had something like $90 trillion worth of derivative bets. Citibank had something like $38 trillion worth of derivative bets. And Bank America had something like $35 trillion worth of derivative bets. Again, they're just making bets. Come back to me, please. This is what they call off-balance sheet leverage. I mean, on-balance sheet leverage is the stuff that gets reported on the SEC documents. You can actually take a ratio between the net worth of the company and the assets of the company. You can see the leverage. However, in the case of derivatives, you don't see that. It's off-balance sheet. And we had an event about 10 days ago that was unprecedented in the history of Wall Street. A major firm, a firm that had been around for 85 years, Bear Stearns, had a market capitalization, i.e. it was worth something like $7 billion on Friday afternoon, and on Monday morning it had gone poof. I mean, virtually the entire market capitalization had gone away. Subsequently, a small amount was restored to around something like $1 billion, but even so, the whole thing just went poof over a weekend. Now, how does an 85-year-old firm that at one time had a $20 billion market capitalization with no malfeasance, I mean, it's not like it was Enron or WorldCom, there was no alleged wrongdoing, how is it that a company like that can disappear? Go to the next slide, please. This is a chart showing the movement of Bear Stearns stock for the last 3 years, and as you can see on the right-hand side, it just fell off a cliff down to almost zip. At one time it was high in the end of 2007, thereabouts. It was $170 a share. On Monday morning, on the 17th, it was something like $2 a share. Go to the next slide, please. And here's the relative performance of Bear Stearns. And as you can see, the whole thing just collapsed. Come back to me, please. Now, part of the reason, I'm going to tell you why this happened and what the response was, but one of the questions you should ask yourself, well, if it could happen to Bear Stearns, why not other companies? Go to the next slide, please. Why not Citibank? Why not J.P. Morgan Chase? Why not Bank America? Why not Lehman Brothers? Why not any of the thousands of hedge funds? Why not Fannie Mae? Why shouldn't all of them just disappear over a weekend? Come back to me, please. Now, these are issues that are important, that are not addressed at this retirement conference, the fact that these companies can just disappear overnight. I had a quote from, I think it was a book or an article I wrote some years ago, and I said, with the current monetary structure, a lifetime of savings, something that you worked your entire lifetime to build up, could disappear in an eye blink. And we have evidence of that now. And again, nobody in the retirement community is talking about this evidence.